Hi, of course it's Colin Quinn, and you're listening to the podcast on the Pantheon Network.
Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 46 of Music is Not a Genre. This is actually the final episode of the season. Let me do the MxG. I've been trying to perfect these hand gestures. I've done it the entire season, and I'm kind of almost there, but you'd think I'd be a little better. But there's reasons for that. Thank you as always for watching and listening. Don't forget you can support this podcast at patreon.com/@musicisnotagenre. I'm going to keep the spiel short today for reasons that you may be able to see if you are watching and not just listening. Please go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre and subscribe. You get all the videos for these. So if you're just listening, you get to see all the lovely faces on this podcast and the wonderful set in the back. Also go to nickdimatteo.com where you get absolutely everything, including the podcast and the music and the voiceovers and the acting and the blog. And my merch store where I have shirts and mugs, quite a few. You still get 20% off as of the publication of this episode. If you use the code SUMMER2320, SUMMER2320, you get 20% off. There's a little button on the top of the website that says shop. You just hit shop. It's the easiest way to do it. And then, as always, please listen to and support my band REC, REC, at recarea.bandcamp.com. There are clearly some elephants in the room here. For those of you who are watching, you may not have heard, but I am not alone. And the reason is this is a very special episode. I am celebrating. Not only is it at the end of the season, the end of season 5, which was a pretty monumental season considering how things have gone from the beginning. This is also celebrating, and I put it that way specifically, the 200th episode of Music is Not a Genre. Now, why do I say celebrating the 200th? I'm not sure which episode the 200th is. It could be this one. Could be the one before it. It could be 6 or 11 episodes from now. I'm not sure because I don't know. I'm very particular about how I count everything. Everything's damn organized and in series and sub-series and all that stuff. And I just can't pinpoint it no matter how hard I try. I've done like 11 podcasts and I've done all these. And in the beginning, it was sort of murky, blah, blah, blah. But there are some streaming services, including YouTube and Apple and Spotify, that say 200 for a recent episode. So I'm going to say that this is a celebration of whichever episode that is. And the reason why I'm calling it a celebration as well is because I have guests here. And that they are my dad, Nicky DiMatteo, and right next to me, my wife, Cathryn. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Tell the audience a little bit about yourselves.
Take it.
You don't have that much time.
Oh yeah, and you may hear some laughing off camera. That is my mom, Julie. She may be throwing some questions our way. Hopefully, really hard ones.
Yeah,
so have some awkward silences.
Well, I am Cathryn. I am, yes, said wife, and elephant number 1 in the room, I think, is what I'm going to claim that one as. I was on one of the very first podcasts you did, I believe.
The very one of the
right?
very first interview versions of this podcast. Yes. Kind of awesome. Yeah, I've done like 30 some of those now. So that was a pretty important beginning.
Well, it's nice to
Yes, nice to have you back.
on the microphone and not in the back room.
That's right. Yeah.
Silent.
We're not trying to fool people into thinking we're in different locations. Cheers. No, thank you. We're drinking. And as you can see, this other guy here in the camera who's going to introduce himself also drinking, because this is not just a podcast, it's a party. And I have to tell you, this is the least prepared I've ever been for any of my podcasts. And I'm very excited about that. Yeah. So who is this guy with this cognac or whatever it is there? Who are you?
My name is Nicky. He's Nick. I'm Nicky. That's the way things go. And I hesitate very much to use the word elephant in describing myself. But
there's got to be a better metaphor.
Yeah, I'll just say a pink panther. But I'm drinking what I've dubbed a Nicky. Now, of course, Cathryn, being a mixologist, it's just vodka with some blackberry brandy. And I put it in the freezer, let it cool off, and there you have it.
Wow.
And this lady sitting next to me is drinking a Manhattan
Excellent.
on the rocks. Yeah. And I made it. Yeah.
Nice.
That is pretty nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I've become quite adept at making Manhattans and a few drinks here and there.
And
That'll work.
I have it's a Sol.
Oh, sure,
I
Mexican.
often drink when I drink beer, I often drink Mexican beers because they're light and refreshing. And this one really is like sunshine in a bottle.
Oh, that's great.
So product endorsement money, please.
Hey,
And-
Booch.
And what is that?
Booch, the kombucha, gingerade. Yeah.
Oh, I got okay.
Excellent. That stuff is so good. We had some last night too. So here we are at the end of season 5. And I have to say that so far it's been my favorite because I've spent the first 3 seasons shaping what this is. And the 4th season really, to my mind, kind of bringing it up to snuff and fleshing out the general structure of each episode. But the 5th season is where all that, to me, kind of took hold, and I could just stay within my routine and do the research I do, and have kind of a reassurance that the machine, such as it is running well enough that I don't have to think as much about that part of it, and I can just enjoy the subjects and the people and all of that.
Oh, that's great. That's
yeah, and I mean, I have to say that you guys have been a big part of it because, not only have you both been guests, Cathryn was an interviewee and an interviewer. And then you've been on, I think, 3 times before. I believe that was the case because we did a 2-part interview.
2-part interview, right?
Question thing, right? And just I don't know if I ever told anybody this story before, and I've talked about where this podcast has come from and how it started as a blog in 2016, and how Music Is Not a Genre was actually the name of a recording project I was doing in 2017, and how the two of them eventually, I started it as a video thing in the end of 2019, and it didn't transition into audio until 2021, really. But the name I took on in the middle of 2020 because the two ideas just seemed to merge. And the recording I was working on, Music Is Not a Genre, was not the right title for that recording. It ended up being The Weird Objective. And it just made sense to make the name of the podcast that. But what I haven't said is, if I go back far enough, I've certainly talked about you, Dad, in many of the episodes when it comes to things like where I learned something, or where I first, was introduced to something, or what my childhood growing up in music was like, and your performance and your recordings and your writing and all of that stuff, and that inspiration. But also with Cathryn, it was her kind of push to say you should do more video. That got me started down this road, because I had done 3.5 years or more of these blogs, and not to take anybody away from anything, you start something during the pandemic, it may have flourished into something amazing. This started several months before the pandemic, because I knew even before then that I needed to have some kind of a regular outlet for this, because when your drinking buddies move away or go their separate ways, you don't get to go to a bar and just talk, hash out what's going on in your mind as far as music goes. So now I've subjected the entire world to that. And yes, that's the power I wield.
Well, and during the pandemic, how many live performances did you do?
Oh yeah, I did over 80 live performances online.
Wow.
Next step.
Yeah. So that was it. So that was an interesting year. Obviously, there wasn't much. We weren't able to have day jobs or any jobs. Performance jobs were gone that year. But to do, an average of 3 shows a week and a podcast a week,
holy mackerel,
just figuring out what the hell this podcast was. And at that time, I'm going to be doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff here, because we're kind of just talking.
Very great. Yeah.
The way I produced it was ridiculous. I would write and set up and record and edit, such as it is, just put it together and do the graphics and release it usually within a day or two.
Oh my.
And I did that for, oh man, like 3 seasons. It was kind of dumb. And then I realized the 4th season, I could do this a week in advance and not drive myself crazy. These things are often recorded weeks and months in advance in a lot of people's worlds. And then this season, I've done a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance, sometimes even more, to give me a little breathing room. But that was a crazy year, doing all that online recording. And again, it was Cathryn's idea. Say, you need to make this an audio podcast. And for those of you who are listening, I had no intention of doing anything with this other than putting this up on YouTube, following in the footsteps of all these other people up on there. And so Cathryn and I often have discussions about what we're doing with our talents. And she always has good ideas. And sometimes, I think that I take her ideas on more quickly than other people's. But even with those, there's always this lag of, okay. I'm too stressed and too busy. I'm already doing too much. I can't even think about that. And then it sinks in and I'm like, oh my God, that's the way to go. That's the right thing to do.
And now 200. Cheers to that.
Yeah.
Drink to that. I drink to everything, but I'll drink to that especially.
Excellent.
There's a guy that I only listen to a few podcasts, and some are recorded and released weekly, and some are more like monthly or every 3 weeks. There's a guy who I had on, Kevin Stroud, who does the History of English podcast, and he's been at it for over a decade. Because his research is so extensive, he's done I think 180 some episodes or 190 some episodes. So he's releasing at a slower clip. And then there's another guy I listen to that does The Fall of Civilizations, where his episodes are like 3 hours or more sometimes. And he'll put one out maybe 3 times a year, something like that. So the pacing is kind of what you want to make it. But I've come to believe in the last few years, whether it has to do with music or podcasting or anything really, that it's very difficult to stay in the minds of anybody in this world who isn't actively seeking you out. Even friends and family, everybody's got their own lives,
Yes.
So in order to stay up front in any significant way, you have to keep active, in one way or another.
Well, you sure are.
And and so that's sort of the thing. And it's exhausting. And there are aspects of it that are super rewarding. Just being able to talk about stuff like this or talk to people or, some of the feedback I get from people on YouTube or every now and then from Patreon or somebody like that. And all that's rewarding and learning things I had never knew. Really rewarding. I did a guest spot on another podcast where I was the expert on David Bowie's Berlin years. I became a quote unquote expert about 3 weeks before when I did the episode on David Bowie, and I've not forgotten most of it. But it's just like cramming for a test. But so that's fun. But the whole process is honestly very exhausting, and I have some plans for season 6 that are going to help kind of stem the tide a little bit.
So, what's your favorite thing been about it then? Is that your favorite? Like, what's been the highlight?
The highlight, I would say the highlight is what I find interesting about so many damn things, whether it's language or music or people in general or the human race or architecture, which is evolution. Yeah, I just released, and I talked about it recently, old Ape Cafe albums, which is a band I was in the 90s. And to hear my vocal evolution and the songwriting evolution of Pete from the first album to the final album was something I had forgotten. It was fascinating to me. When I listened to U2's first album and then their 4th and then their 8th and then their 12th, absolutely fascinating. And so to go back and kind of listen to or look at old episodes of this podcast and see where it started and where it's come to, I think the thing that I feel best about is that I have given it the space and myself the space to bring it to where I've always wanted it to be. And it is quite different from where it started. Episodes are longer, they're a little more in depth, etc. They're less tied to the writing part of it and all of that. But just like with all this other evolution stuff, you can find the origins of everything that I'm doing now in the very first episode, just the same way, very first album of an artist, you hear those origins.
Wonderful.
Like the Beatles. Yeah.
Can I interject something here?
Oh, can you hear her?
Oh. So the manager of Nicky is his wife, Julie, my mother. And it's good to have that prompting, But I know you wanted to say, looks like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, you were talking about the influence that Dad had on you because of his amazing career, but starting at age 7. But you actually started writing. I'm thinking about like Paul McCartney, who wrote when I was 64, when he was like 15 years old.
Something like that.
And when was your first recording in a studio?
Well, you were talking too with Jesse Jackson about that.
Okay.
Right.
And when you were about 15 and you read John Hersey's Hiroshima. And
yeah, I mean, that has to qualify as my first professional recording, right? And I still have it. On regular, loose leaf paper, list of my first 100 some songs or whatever, and written out. This was before we had a personal computer or any of that stuff. I didn't want to use a word processor, typewriter or whatever. And I would write out the names and certain other aspects of each song and keep it as a record. And I chose Radiation Blues as the first one, even though there were probably a good 10 or 20 other songs I had written before from the time I was 6 years old on. But that was the one where I first thought, oh, this is me choosing to be a songwriter, and choosing to record it and choosing to ask you to, and it wouldn't be the first time or the last time, to give up a lot of your money to pay for my recording.
It's well spent.
First one in the studio.
Yeah. In Philadelphia on Chestnut Street with Joe.
But I also say that my first real time in the studio was with you when you were recording your solo album.
You mentioned that to Jesse Jackson too.
Yeah. And that I think I got the bug from there, be like, I love it here. I want to be here,
Well, you are where you want to be.
And now I get to do all the recording right where I'm sitting, which is very exciting for creativity and not so exciting for every other aspect of it. But that's the world we live in and the finances we have. So,
Well, conception to completion, on average, what do you think? How long does it take? Conception to completion.
For a song?
Yeah, just on average. No, your podcast.
Oh, all right. Well, so I have a list, which if I had decided in fact, here's what I'm going to do, because this is so informal and I insist on keeping it that way. I am going to share my screen with everybody.
What do you mean?
It will actually work. Where is it? It's this one. All right. So can you see that?
Oh, for crying out loud.
So this is a list. The green means I've done it already. So options just means here are options for future podcasts. And I started this last season or the season before. And so these are all the ones I've done.
Wow.
I do my catch up episodes, name checking people who have commented and stuff like that.
A lot of work.
This is the one I'm working on now. That's why it's in yeller. This is the one I kind of started. I decided to push to next season. And then all the rest of these are ones I haven't gotten to yet that I plan to get to.
Wow.
And then these are my notes in case you can't see them. Yeah. And I've just made everything disappear. Now, and you can see, so here's some here we go. I'm kicking off season 6 with another freewheeling catch-up machine, which is basically me, like I said, fan comments and things that I missed or mistakes I made or things I wanted to add. I'm wrapping up the Beatles series in the beginning of the season. I'll probably do more at some point in the future. I'm doing a history of albums decade by decade. I'm doing a techno episode with Depeche Mode and New Order. I'm spotlighting Beck, the artist, because so many people say a lot of what I do with REC sounds like Beck, and the rhyming is just a coincidence.
It rhymes too, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to try to interview Robert Schneider from Apples and Stereo. I might have Pete on finally as an interview guest. I'm going to continue my back talk series where I have a guest talking about a subject. Maybe one of you will do that, and then a bunch of other things, you know.
So despite the work or any hardship, doesn't sound like you have any plans on stopping anytime soon. Is this just what it is for the foreseeable future?
Yeah,
And
well,
season 6 looks pretty tight.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that I had this overrun where there were some weeks and seasons where I had no idea what I was going to. And there are often weeks like that still where I'm like, okay, it's Monday. I'm not sure which topic I'm doing. And then I'll look at the list and I'll take a note or two on one topic and then another. And the one where I start to dig in and do research, I'm like, that's the one that's moving me the most. But I think because I'm feeling so good about it and the way it's working, and I actually have more viewers and more people subscribing and more listeners. And now that I'm part of the Pantheon Network, I've got a lot more people listening. And hello out there to Christian and Peter and all the great people at Pantheon and all the listeners. And I, you know, have a very small but loyal Patreon crew that, and because let's face it, the jobs I do allow me the time to do this. Then unless something comes along where I'm a, you know, freaking regular on a TV show or I'm doing a tour, you know, a band tour in one way or another, I'm just going to keep doing this, you know.
Why not? You love it. You got to get across the message that you want to tell people, you know, about about your music.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always try to tie my music in one way or another, or whoever I'm interviewing, their music or what they do, or I've highlighted your music here and there, and things like that. But and now I forget what I was going to say. So it's your turn.
So when you forget, you take a drink. Egg is shaking.
Well, I should always have a drink on.
I try
Come
to.
on. You're too young.
I try to drink very very audibly, and anything I do audibly because I really can't stand the micro editing when it comes to my own podcast. One of the reasons why I don't like a lot of dead air or having not thought through things or leaving in little mistakes because they can be fun and informal is because I just don't want to have to freaking edit. You know, but I think the other thing is I've tried to create a little bit of a different atmosphere with this podcast than you might find from some other music podcasts, which is I want to bring a level of information and research and then a level of insight and from the, being a music insider and all that stuff, but also a real level of kind of off the cuff informality, casual talk that sounds like a very excited and enthusiastic conversation that you might have with somebody.
So how do you feel about music is not a genre now after your 200th episode as opposed to when you first started? Are you doubling down on this idea? Has it evolved? Has it morphed? What do you think about music is not a genre as an idea now?
I think that I think I don't necessarily need to double down because, well, I think I have doubled down because there have been episodes where I've said, well, this is why I believe music is not a genre. And the reason that keeps popping up is because every time I encounter a critic or a person I know, personally, or a person I know personally, who has an opinion about music that is based on bias due to their perception of a genre or their perception of what a genre should be or their perception of what a band they like should be because they started in a certain genre, it makes me want to double and triple down this because my philosophy, even before I knew this MxG was a thing, is that the only thing that matters is whether or not you feel the music is good. And B, are you connected to it? Do you like it? And I say you feel the music is good because there are songs that I know that people absolutely love that, I mean, I can understand that objectively they're good, but subjectively I really cannot stand, but I have to have that ability to inject my opinion in things and say, well, I like this, I don't like this, but at the same time, not be one of those critics who believes wholeheartedly that because they don't like something that it's not good. Like that drives me crazy. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean it's not good. And that to me plugs right into the whole idea of, well, if music isn't a genre, the way you shouldn't pigeonhole people or any other ideas in the world. I think ideology can be very confining.
It has to do with prejudice and bias and all that. You mentioned something earlier about insight. Now, what if to give your listeners and viewers some concept of the insight and the information that you'd like them to have about the business, about you, about life in general, it might be very helpful to the viewers in their lives.
Well, that's nice. I mean, I think that I did do an episode about what things to watch out for when you're looking for information about music and the music business, and how there are things that might be worth paying for, and that there are a lot of things that you shouldn't have to pay for, and that you want to make sure when you sign up for something that it's with someone who's doing it for the right reasons, because often people will, have courses out there, things that they ask you to pay for, that you could get this information yourself.
There's a line.
And I had a guy on named Nomad, that's his stage name, and he does a course. And one of the things he prides himself on is, I am a working musician. I am in the studio. I am writing. I am working for other musicians. They hire me to do session work. I'm not just making all of my money on getting starving artists to pay for me to tell them what to do. I'm living.
I remember that. Nomad, right.
Yeah. And I think that matters to me. Like when I ask people to join Patreon, I want to make sure I'm giving them a value, whether it's the music or the podcast or anything else. And there's even more to come when that really starts to take off. And as opposed to, I could easily just sit back and tell people what I think and feel, or some other thing, and have them, pay money to hear it or see it. And I find that to be, it's understandable from the point of wanting to make a living on a certain level, but it feels like a ripoff to me. So I think that's one of the, like that's a personal experience from having been a musician working towards trying to find his niche in the music industry, and having been on so many different sides of it and so many levels, saying to people, even when you're desperate, it doesn't mean that you should, like, there was one guy who was like, my course is $5,000. That's all. And I was like, that's all?
That's all.
That's all some musicians make in 6 months. Like that's please stop it.
Oh, gracious.
If you have that much money to spend on just some random course, then you're not hurting that much.
Yeah.
Or you're doing something else that it's entirely aside from your music career.
And hopefully that kind of personal integrity will not go unrewarded.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, right?
Launching your online course.
Well, my course, yeah,
Yes.
Exactly. This is all leading to
$4,495.
Thank you. Thank you.
Market.
That's right. That's right. Come with me and I will teach you the way. I should have said that in a deeper voice, but
or not, or say it in a falsetto voice.
Can I interject?
All right, the Hungarian is speaking.
I need to hear it.
You said that Dad influenced you from his music, and I'm trying to remember when you first realized that. I remember we had black and white solid videos of you dancing around the dining room table, some Christmas song.
Yes.
And
God rest ye, merry gentlemen.
That's right.
I've got videos of those as well from last year.
do you remember when he first
True.
had an influence on you in music?
Probably it was just something that he grew up with, like you say, hearing.
I mean, I think it was a few things we mentioned, like the studio time. It was the going to the clubs at the even an age before I remember going and going in that atmosphere, seeing you do all kinds of music, you know, and not limiting yourself to just one genre. I really think a lot of the way I feel about music comes from that. It comes from what we listened to at home. There was always a real mix between the two of you of the things you liked. It comes from growing up in the 70s and 80s with radio stations that weren't afraid to play mixes like that before like Pure Channel and things kind of took over and made it like programmatic. So like all of that kind of, I'm reading a book now on the 90s, and it talks a lot about Generation X and how we're kind of an anomaly in that we're very different from the generation that came before and the generations that came before and after in so many ways, partly because of the timing of things, that you almost, it's like the flow of evolution in time had this weird spike during the period of our heyday. And we often go back to the idea of, well, radio used to be like this, or this is how you used to contact somebody, etc. Or, and the generations that came before us, other than the boomers are part of that, I think, don't have that much interest in how the things have changed, most of them, or they don't care as much. And the generations that came after didn't experience the changes that we experienced. So they don't really have a flavor of what it was like to live in an analog world before the digital world took over. And I think the same was true for music on a large scale, as far as diversity and etc., until the internet came along in the last 15 years or so and showed people the stuff that they were missing. So there was music that they wouldn't have heard on the radio or on their programmatic things that they listen to that they're discovering now. And that's reflected in a lot of the ways music is being made again. And that's just really exciting to me. It's not the same as what we grew up with, but there are a lot of parallels.
And you're doing enough live performance to capture the energy of an audience reacting to you, which you can't get in a studio.
Right. Okay, everybody. It doesn't sound like there was a break, and I don't usually do this, but since this is sort of a behind the scenes episode, I'm going to tell you something right now, which is that we're recording this on Zoom. Moreover, it's the free version of Zoom. Yes, that's because almost everything I use, I either have owned forever or is free. And that can change with your help. This is just think of PBS or NPR. If you join patreon.com/@music is not a genre, I could spend the few bucks a month on Zoom so we don't have to restart the link to restart the recording.
You have to stop making it sound and look so good with the free shit. Okay. Like, look a little more desperate. I mean, come on. What are you doing here? You're looking way too good. You're making things seamless. You're barely editing. Exactly. There you go. Come on.
Yeah.
You need to crank it up a little bit more. You're making this shit too smooth.
Well, that's very nice. That's very nice. But yeah, no, I'm not fine.
Well, you've taken her advice before.
Do you see
T-shirt, man.
The hole in my T-shirt? I sell 28 T-shirts and 6 mugs, and I own 2 of them because I don't want to spend the money to buy all the rest. I don't have it. So the only way for me to model with my lovely body the T-shirts or the mugs is for y'all to buy them, and so that I can buy them, so that I can show more people about them. There's an old one from Feek. Represent. And because I'm going to tell you another behind the scenes. Every Podfast, I like to do some physical comedy. It's something I enjoy. It's fun. It's something a little different. Thank you. And for some reason,
what do you have in mind for now?
The episode. What's that?
What do you have in mind for this podcast?
Well, so for the next Podfast, I keep pushing it off because what I want to do is to model a bunch of my T-shirts. Is to be able to say, here's Bill Neiman, here's MxG, here's a REC logo, here's I need coffee or whatever it is. And I want to be able to take one off, put one on, take one off, put one on camera, but to have my friend, the Podfast text that keeps hitting me in the face every time I take my shirt off, it would block the the view of me taking the shirt off to, spare
Like
people
a
the
blur?
agony. Yeah. Right. And
Maybe you shouldn't have a blur because maybe that would
I
get a
can-
couple dollars in there. I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
Julie's
I'm
not
not-
the only manager here.
I'm not
Nick,
below.
okay? I'm just saying, like,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
not below that. Yeah.
no side of dollars coming
You
in.
want a little
know?
beefcake? Yeah.
You do a lot of workouts. I see you back there. I mean, I'm willing to. What we got to do to put bread on the table, my love.
All right. All right. You heard it here first.
Aren't you proud of the person your son has decided to
Absolutely.
with for the rest of your life?
I'll
That's
drink to
right.
You're
that.
welcome. Salute.
That's right.
Okay.
Pride
Yes.
goeth before the fall. So, yeah.
What for?
Yeah. Oh, you should
Talk
have
about his
one.
karate career. Which
Well,
has
well,
music.
so before we get to that, I want to answer that question, which is about live and recording. And here are a few things. I find them to be very, cross informative, that you can learn a lot about how to record something by performing it live. You can learn a lot about how to make a song sound dynamic in the studio by having performed it live. Is the structure right? Do you find when I'm performing a song, especially early on, I'd be like, oh, this instrumental section's too long, or I need to do the chorus twice here, because you feel the audience saying that to you, and that informs how you write, and eventually you absorb it and you don't really need it that much anymore. But that recording can also inform how you do live, because you're listening to your own voice and what you're playing, and you're really honing in on the details of all of that, and the impression you want to make on a listener based on how the song is created, And at the same time, I feel about live music and recorded music the way I feel about musical theater, which is those elements are at their best when they're separate. They're not awful when they're together. They can often be great when they're together. There are a lot of live albums that are amazing. I'm not a fan of live albums in general, because my thought is, when you record something, you want that recording to be as close to the vision in what you're hearing in your head as possible, and as easy for other people to pick up on as possible. So you can't capture a live experience in any better way than being there live. That experience exists on its own. It's a beautiful thing. It needs to continue. The more we do it, the more we're on either side of it, the better. And to me, you can't make, oddly, rarely, if ever, a great live recording. That recording should be done in an atmosphere where you're getting the best sound that you can get.
Well, that's dependent on what kind you do too. You know what I mean? There's some really wonderful jazz albums out there that are done live, where you feel like you're in the room with the piano, and it's just very minimal. You know what I mean? So you do very, very correct. Of course, you do very structured, layered, intricate recordings when you put your stuff down without you being in a live room would sound completely different. So I can understand why you wouldn't want to record that. But I have a question for you. I mean,
well, jazz and classical, I think, are exceptions. There's,
what that is.
or like capturing an orchestra, or capturing improvisation, But I guess I'm more like, or like, as much as I'm not a fan of Phish or the Grateful Dead, they improv so much that they're almost like jazz bands, and I understand that. But if you're, I'd rather listen to a Metallica recording than that they did in the studio than a live recording of them in a concert, because the sound is crap, and you're not really getting the energy that you would get if you were there.
You can't hear the pyro.
And you can't hear the pyrotechnics.
And you would know that because you just went to the Metallica concert.
That's right.
What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, okay, so I can see how that would all be true of what you just said as far as live recordings versus, in-person performances for music. But do you think the same is true for live recordings of podcasts? Because I know that you really, really, really love the connection, and you like conversation, and it's one of your points of doing this. So do you ever think of you doing your podcast in a live setting and recording that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, had I thought of this sooner, I invited my Patreon people to join, but it was kind of too late for anybody to think. But it might to kind of have that back end of like, well, if you're a part of Patreon and you want to be in some way a part of a podcast episode, you can be here asking questions and giving answers and like insight and stuff like that. Even if it's just in the chat, I'll call you out by name or the whole thing. And then, of course, having guests and all of that. I plan to do more of that next season. And there'll be a few other changes next season, which I'm really excited about too. But I think that the reason to me that I'll say this, I have edited other people's podcasts where they were done in a live setting, not live as is like you're hearing it as it's released. That's different. They were recorded in a live setting and the sound is terrible. But if you are podcasting live from a studio, that's great.
Yeah, that's much different.
That's
than,
much
you know,
different.
absolutely.
And it's different to me that even when you record, like for example, the early Beatles albums or the first one at least, they first couple, they recorded as a band. They weren't overdubbing hardly at all. A little bit here and there, but they recorded it as a 4-piece. They were playing as if they were live, but they were being captured in a pristine studio setting. Right. So that's different to me, that you're getting that live spirit, but you're doing it in a place where you're doing the sound justice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I found myself overperforming from live to recording. Live, I would just give it all, and recording, I shouldn't have given it all.
Yeah,
I should have brought it back some, but still tried to maintain the excitement. That's a difficult thing to do. Excitement of a live performance, but you can hold back on the voice. I mean, it's like I was working Wildwood in 1977, and I started singing a song called Lucille. Kenny was it Kenny Rogers?
I think it was Kenny Rogers.
Yeah, it was. And my problem was I started singing it and not acting it.
Yeah.
You can't. And the bartender kind of clued me in on that. And this was 1977.
Show the difference.
You know what?
Yeah.
Picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. 4 hungry kids and a crop in the field or something like that. But I was trying to sing it. It lost something there.
It's a country song.
It's a country song.
I don't know if people really understand, especially nowadays, how polished, recording artists, people are very critical of recording artists, I know these days, but to really be able to capture the spirit of a song on a recording is really not easy at all. And I know a lot of people, having been a photographer and photographed a lot of musicians in studio and live, where there are some very, very, very brilliant musicians out there, but it's exceptionally hard to get them to record an album because they go off the cuff and they can't do the same thing twice because they're so inspired by that moment, because their ears hear so much at one time. You know what I mean? So there's definitely an art in front of people or in the booth. You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right.
Do both, and you can really be there for both. It's quite a feat. I'm sure I've listened to your recordings, Nicky. They're fantastic.
Well, thank you for that.
Sing it the way you used to sing it.
No, when I was in New York at Bell Sound Studios in 1958-9, and I'm singing, and in the studio was the entire backup group band. The Ray Charles singers were not the black Ray Charles. The white Ray Charles singers who used to sing with Perry Como on his television show. They were in the studio. And I'm in a booth by myself with earphones, and suddenly the A&R man in the booth stops the recording. He says to me only, "Nick, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're singing too good." He said, "Just clip your words. Don't hold the notes. Don't use too much vibrato." He said, "In other words, try to sound a little more like Frankie Avalon."
Yeah.
Who 2 years earlier had asked me who my voice teacher was. it was very good for him that he did not go to her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it's to me, rock and roll is like folk music.
But you had the classical voices.
I had that kind of classical training, so I that was the only record I ever made that hit the top 100 in the country. Didn't go very high, but it was
suddenly. Yeah,
suddenly, exactly. Which you did a great remake of it, a cover version.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, you're on that remake. Yeah.
Yeah, see, and you also did a cover version of I Want to Be Lonely, which was produced by Jerry Ross, who Spanky and Our Gang, he produced, and also Bobby Hebb, Sonny. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's funny because I interviewed that guy, Scott Shea, who did the Mamas and Papas book, and Spanky is in that book because they were associated with Mamas and Papas.
They were?
So in fact, when what's his name, John Phillips tried to reform the Mamas and Papas in the 80s, he had Spanky sit in for Cass Elliot.
Cass.
Yeah.
Yeah, you told me that. That is a fascinating.
That's really fast. Yeah, I have to get you that book.
How things are all connected.
The Bono book. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I remember you telling me that about to me, it's the difference in many ways between stage acting, television acting and film acting.
Exactly.
They're each I find TV to be sort of in the middle. You can get away with some stage stuff on TV. Right. But if you try to do that in a film, you're going to look ridiculous. You're going to be overdoing it, essentially. And
exactly.
I think for studio, it's the same thing, but knowing when to turn on the juice and knowing when to come in and do this, and that's different from, I can't tell you, there are very few live performances of myself and whether it's my music or the Beatles stuff or the 80s stuff that I am ever really satisfied with. Every now and then I'll go through a patch of, it's like what a famous actor said about he felt like he might have had one true moment on camera. Just is so his standards were so much I want to always be there in the moment. And I just feel like I'm just missing the mark all the time. And I think one of the reasons why I enjoy the studio so much is because it's this controlled environment where I can do 6 takes of a lead vocal and then pick line 1 from take 1, take 2, they're called comping, comping vocals or comping. I comp my guitar solos all the time and the drums because they're not my strongest instruments. And there are times where I'll have a phrase of one, I don't know, hey, it's okay to let go today. And I like how I say, hey, it's okay to let go. But when I hit today, I missed it. So I take the today from one thing and I fade them. So it sounds like it's the same exact take.
That's astounding.
Because I can get that close, which you want in a recording. Because if people are listening to it over and over and over, you don't want it to be like, he missed that note again, But live, I can't tell you how many times where I'm like, the monitor sucked. So I'm over singing. I lose my voice. I can't hear my own voice. There's so many other things where I'm like, I think you have to let it go and be like, the point of the live recording is everybody being in the live performance is everybody being in the same moment together and enjoying the music. And it's not about perfection.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Because some of the best things that you have heard recently that you absolutely love, as far as I can tell, are old Ape Cafe recordings of you doing it live. And people who were there still want you all to get back together and do it again because they loved the energy that you put out there. And don't you think that the reason that you like those live recordings, some of the ones more than you've ever done, is because you guys did it all the time. So you get in that groove.
By the third album. Yeah, for sure. Just
about people who perform live all the time find their pocket and they go there. And so then all the other things, of course, bad sound is bad sound. That's hard to get around, but you find your magic pocket in that live set
because you've done it live so much. I agree. I agree.
I mean, is that, you're on stage, you're making people feel things in those chicken heads and what is the hat? What is the hat? The hat is the mummer's hat. Exactly.
The mummer's hat. Yeah.
Good studio. It's fabulous, but you got to wear the mummer's hat more. I guess.
Yeah.
That's my whole point to all of
There's
that.
the quote, the takeaway. You got to wear the mummer's hat more.
Live performance for myself right out of the studio,
That's-
so might have just been
Well,
a
right,
little
because there are
self-serving.
people who hate the studio because they're just so they feel so like claustrophobic and like they're like the
Yes,
spotlight's
constricted.
on them.
Mike is attacking me, Nick. That is the
The-
whole point. The mic is attacking me.
The-
My own voice. Okay.
You know, yeah. Well, I didn't want to say it, but yeah, it's true. That kind of brings up something that I thought of when you were talking about you having to sing less well on a recording, and that is it almost feels like the each generation in this family has been slightly different musically, and even though we have generations, someone in each generation doing something musical, you had kind of the, I think, middle ground where you had full classical training and you have the chops for that, but you went in a pop and rock direction. And I have very minimal classical training and fully immersed in pop and rock and blues and, and jazz and all like the popular media for music. And then Colin, who does a little bit of the pop stuff, but is fully immersed in classical and opera. And
Your lovely
thing.
son.
Yeah,
for
my
those who
son.
do not know.
Yeah, who is now he's still in school, but he's doing like real performances and
19 years
out in the world and stuff like that. Yeah, and each one asks for something different because there's a level of perfection you need from an operatic performance. But at the same time, if you get the right coach, which fortunately Colin has, they tell you that don't try to make your voice sound so perfect that you lose the soul of your voice. And we've seen him go or heard him go from this very kind of slightly rigid delivery to just a fluid kind of beautiful thing.
Oh, that's
and
great.
There are times where I feel like I get too fluid and I try to get so imperfect that I'm like missing half the notes, and some of it's on purpose, but some of it is like, all right, I need to maybe just step this up a little bit more. Like I'm not like, I'm not forgetting all the blues guys' names who sing great, but the whole point of that wasn't about being perfectly on pitch all the time. It was allowing for quarter tones and half tones and elision and things like that pop out of nowhere. And I like to try to find that middle ground of, well, I want everything to be on point pitch wise, but I want to have that room to be able to slide things left and right. And you're kind of in between me and Colin, where you're pretty much like, you have to really work at being off key.
Yeah, right.
Like you're on key, like almost naturally,
Well, and Colin has perfect pitch.
Right. True.
Yeah,
that too.
So,
That's astounding.
I don't know. You guys, okay, so we have the three here. You, Nicky and Nick and Colin. Nicky, what did your dad do? I actually don't know, if you don't mind me asking. It wasn't anything to do musically, was it?
No, well, he did play what they call the concertina, an Italian.
Oh yeah,
the little accordion. He did. That's about all I ever heard him.
But like, where do you think the
musically
chops came from?
How you started voice lessons?
Who did?
How you started voice lessons?
Voice lessons. Yeah, yeah. Dad. Yeah, that's all I ever saw him do at a party or something. Pull out that concertina, put it on his knee, and he played da 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 da. That's, I still remember that melody.
Wow.
But how did you start voice lessons?
How did I start voice lessons? I was in the second grade, and my sister Dolly and Sarah came to take me out of school. And the teacher let me go. She knew about my singing stuff, and a guy had come to the door and asked if there's anybody who in this. He was a salesman, is what he was.
Mm-hmm.
Door-to-door salesman, trying to sign up people to go to a music school. And my sisters brought me home, and I did some a cappella singing, and then he said, "Yeah, he's fine. Take $10 and you get." My sister Dolly gave him the $10 so that I could start taking voice lessons.
Wow.
From Mrs. Marie Whartonby.
Yeah,
Marie Whartonby, who she was my first voice teacher. And mostly two things she concentrated on: diction and hearing. So they have to understand what you're saying, and projection. They have to hear it. So breathe and get the right notes. And yes, of course, that's the way it worked back then.
Makes
And
sense.
that's the way it was. And they cautioned me. My singing teacher, Mrs. Warby, my manager at the time, Tony Mambo, do not sing rock and roll. It'll hurt your voice. And it took me a few years to unlearn or not use what I learned in order to be able to sing rock and roll credibly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't certainly remember that kind of development because that happened before I was old enough to really be aware of it. But I remember the effects of it, which was the result, which was you could pivot from doing, practically a whole scene from Fiddler on the Roof in character and have the pitch of a musical theater person to then doing some kind of a blues song or a rock and roll song and then pivot to a jazz thing.
Right.
And that takes there's a discipline to unlearning as much as there is a discipline to learning, like stretching where you come from,
No question about that.
Yeah. The flexibility, discipline to learning how to be flexible, to learning how to be less.
It was necessary in my particular field, singing in clubs to people with all kinds of various tastes and music, and that was necessary, and it took a while, but it came about. And,
What's your favorite style to sing?
Well, I guess I don't have one favorite. I don't sing a lot of semi-classical anymore. But yeah, that reminds me of a question that I was working at Piano Bar in Philadelphia. 5100 Club on 51st and City Line Avenue. And a guy who was kind of drunk, he said, well, sing your favorite song. I don't have one. What do you mean? You're a singer. You should have I said, the very fact that I do this for a living and I know and love so many songs and genres, as you will. I said, am I going against that? I shouldn't say genre. You know what I'm saying? Types of songs.
Yep. Totally.
That precludes my having one thing that is my favorite. I will say a recording I made many years ago, probably around 60 or 61. A songwriter named Joe Dieni went to Italy and had music made, the whole background music to this beautiful song called Pioggia d'Amore. I went into the studio and I did a version of that. I sang, and the beautiful orchestra, chorus, the whole thing. And today, what's your name? Rain of Love, Pioggia d'Amore. And I still think that's one of my better on-record performances.
Wow. About the song.
But when
That's
Julie
cool.
met me, she said, what kind of music you sing? I said, well, kind of all kinds of music. And she, snob that she is, and, witty Hungarian, she said, do you do any Ozark Mountain Hillbilly songs? You said, no, you son of a gun.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Well done, Julie.
I
That
don't.
was the spark that connected us.
And here we are.
That's great. See, so I get the musical talent from you, and I get that attitude from Mom.
That witty stuff. Yeah, right.
Yeah, because I'm always looking for, all right, so yeah, sure, you like you too, but what about, the Wombats? Have you heard of them?
So was it Julie that you asked him that question? How long ago when you guys met?
64. Summer 64.
Yeah,
So
I'm
you
sorry.
writing for me and music for him. How about that?
Yeah,
There you go.
64, huh? I'm sorry it didn't work out, guys.
We're still working at it.
So, yeah. Takes a while. You'll get it.
Yeah,
You'll figure it out.
Keep drinking. It'll work.
We're gonna give it another 56 years.
Yeah. Okay. We'll all take that.
I know.
Yeah, we feel like we've run out of drinks, which is not good because we haven't run out of time. We're not
Still have a
done
little
here
bit.
yet. You did it
You
right.
guys are doing it well.
Yeah.
Yeah, she still has some Manhattan.
If I
say Eggy
uh-huh.
I said that once to her aunt in Sharpsville. Her aunt was present in the room, and she said, "What? you know what you just said? I said, what? She said, you said to your rear end. I said, what? That's MxG. She told me how to pronounce it, but I still like pronouncing it.
MxG, tell me one.
Oh, it's slightly different. Yeah.
Slightly different, but
That's a mysterious, witchy language, Hungarian. I'm telling you. It's weird.
Yeah, Grandma used to call her the Hungarian.
Oh my God. Yeah, right. Oh man.
And my father called her the foreigner.
Right.
And he spoke with an Italian accent till the day he died.
Yeah.
Came here in 1912.
God, that's so great.
But anyway, speaking of drinks, yeah, I still have some. You guys,
that's good.
You guys gulped it down. That was not, what the heck?
We have a little time left here. Everybody who's listening and watching, if you haven't been drinking this whole time, first of all, you're missing out on all the subtle fun. But there's time for you to go get a drink.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Pause this. However you're taking it in, go get a drink.
See, this would be the advantage of a live show.
Yeah.
And as somebody who used to and does not anymore imbibe, there's nothing more fun than being able to give a live audience drinks. I do it really well.
Yeah, right.
You can ensure the people that you are serving with this podcast are going to be, 6 sheets to the wind by the time you're done. That's a good conversation.
That's right.
Starter,
That's right. Drinking is not a genre. So,
well, most of my fans know that my drink when I was working was Remy Martin, and VSOP. And
of course, only the best.
After a number of years, I had quite a lot of it saved at home.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you know that.
Yeah. And you just would take it because you're someone who didn't take breaks, after a certain period of years, you just didn't take a break and you would keep getting drinks handed to you. And I never understood how you could drink all that and not have even a bathroom break. But it's partly because you would just bottle it up and take it home.
I'd sip the Remy. Yeah. Right. Had I been drinking beer, no, I would be taking bathroom breaks. But we had a case of it. At one point, one of my fans, Pasquale Giacchetti, who used to sing with me, he said, "Nicky, I hear you got a lot of bottles of Remy." I said, "I do." He said, "Look, I'll buy them from you, and I'll put a sticker around the neck of it, so like it was never." I said, "Oh, yeah." He was going to
sell it out of the back of a truck.
Yeah, exactly. No.
Oh, that's funny.
I mixed that one.
I find most of what I'm doing now is, I'm going to get REC back up on its feet soon. We got a new album coming out, and the me will become a we again, and we'll figure out how to do the performances. But for now, most of what I'm doing is with the cover bands and Beatles and 80s, and we'll do like anywhere from 2 to 4 sets, which is pretty average. And what I've found is the first set can go well, the energy's there, but it's often kind of a warm-up set that you sometimes between the first and second set I'll have a beer or a drink,
right,
and my voice will be warmed up, and then I'll be a little warmed up. And the second set, if the monitor's right and the conditions are right and I haven't been over singing, that second set goes really well, and the third set is looser.
Wow.
The energy's really exciting. And that usually is about what I like to do at any given, gig. I might have one drink in between sets and then a drink afterwards if I'm sticking around, something like that. Unless I'm driving, or if I'm driving home, I just drive home. But
that's wise. That's control. While you're planning your new recordings, and don't forget you and this very lovely lady sitting next to you. You guys make beautiful music together.
We have, yes. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Thank you.
Let's put her in the spotlight because we have a song that we've been working on for a while that we're almost done recording. That I think is one of the best songs I've been a part of in my whole career. And it's in large part because of how well we work together and Cathryn's contributions and all of that.
Absolutely.
And the inspiration I got to kind of start the song from Cathryn and her friend and the circumstances we were under at the time. And all that has come together to create a song that I think is going to do extremely well, or at least be extremely well liked.
And that was co-written by you and Cathryn. Correct?
Co-written. and will be co-sung, co-lead singer, the whole
Wonderful.
thing. And like I say, yeah, it'll be the first. So even though some songs may come out before that one's done, it'll be the first song that I have on record chronologically in terms of recording where I'm playing the drums. And that's not the best part of the recording. I think the best part is the song itself and the way we sing it.
Yeah.
It's exciting for me to think that this song, I'm able to do it justice with the limited skill I have on that instrument, and it's still going to come across as a good song once we can get it all wrapped up. It's been a busy year. Let's just say that.
Of course. No, you have to focus.
Well, now that you know that I feel like the microphone is attacking me when I'm in the studio, you'll see how there's a little reluctance in me finishing that vocal back in January. I mean,
that's I'm going to have a microphone installed in front of your shirts without you knowing it, so that if you're ever rehearsing singing to yourself, I can capture it impromptu, and then you won't.
I would like to hear the recording of what
that would be
the microphone on my.
It sounds like this.
So much profanity.
That too. That's how. Then we can make that the remix version.
Oh my.
We make that the 12-minute remix.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yeah. The album cut. Yeah.
It's the album cut. Exactly. Yeah.
Word.
No, and we did do a lot of performing together, especially during the pandemic, but even before. We started before, and we did a little bit after, or whatever you would call after. We did a little bit in the tail of that. I have a bit of a lull in my performing schedule in the fall, a part of the fall anyway, and I plan to book some local gigs.
Oh, great.
And I mean, predominantly, I'm just going to be pulling from my, a combination of my own music and all the covers that I've been doing with the bands. And I think that'll be a good mix for any bar or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
But I have the potential for a guest singer to come in and do some sets too.
Well, ain't that
Pay them well.
Okay. All right. Well,
and not in drinks.
We'll negotiate. We'll negotiate.
Yeah, negotiation time.
Yeah. So what would you, kind of sort of wrapping up, but not quite yet, are there things in particular that anybody can start? I love saying that because I hear that on podcasts all the time. Whoever wants to take the mic on this, that you have particularly enjoyed about Music Is Not a Genre.
Well, I enjoy the back and forth that you have with with your guests. Okay, I enjoy the history of what you're doing, what you do with various podcasts. When you concentrate on a specific group, like the Beatles, of course. I became a total fan of the Beatles in 1964 after having seen Hard Day's Night.
Let me interrupt you there real quick.
Yeah,
One of the jokes that our drummer likes to give, he introduces some songs and he's like, this next song was the title track of the Beatles' first film, A Hard Day's Night. Can anybody tell me what that song is? And it actually stumps some people. They're like, is this a trick question?
No. Yeah. Okay, well, yeah. That just
anyway, go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's good. That's the truth. In fact, the other day, I speaking of that movie, I was at night. I'm thinking about your mother, and the words came to me. A love like ours will never die as long as I have you near me. Those words, and then I kept going over the words, and finally the melody came to me. A love like ours will never die as long as I have you near me. I couldn't think of what that song was. It's about 1:30 in the morning, and I'm thinking, I'll give Nick a call. I'll give Dave a call. They'll know. But I held myself from doing that. And then it finally came to me, the next line. Bright are the stars that shine. So Hard Day's Night, and I love her.
Yeah.
And I told you about that eventually. And of course,
I get to sing that one when we do that song on the show. So it's nice.
You have a high voice like McCartney.
Not quite, but close enough to make it work.
Close enough, yeah, right.
So what about you? Oh, go ahead.
Anybody who can sing, I'm maybe I'm amazed.
Yeah, that I don't do that one, but yeah.
I do like the same things. I like that you are constantly making connections with past artists and new artists, and you're really good at tying all of that together. And then, of course, the influence on your own music, and I like that. I like that it's forced you to reach out to people and um, create community where you didn't really think maybe there was, which I know is a hard thing to do, especially when it's so easy to kind of just be in our own little worlds and isolated, especially if you work from home. So I think that's a really good thing.
Wow.
But also that you are excellent at doing things regularly. You're a very consistent person and you keep doing them. But within that, I like that. I think it's pushing you to go out of your own comfort zone and get into the places that you don't feel quite as comfortable in, like live performance. And I think that doing the podcast regularly helps you do that. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Like
Yeah.
you have an anchor, so then you're able to jump off from that point. And I think that's an exciting place to be. So you're not just doing the same thing. You're always pushing to see what that same thing is going to launch you into.
Oh, that's well,
like
and
that.
is the hope that one thing connects to another and then leads to something else.
Big a web of MxG.
The web. Ooh,
The web.
I like that. The web
Is
And
there
then
a
there'll be
way?
podcast with some sort of character that comes in and
hits me right in the face.
Spider-Man's
again.
you.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Pins me against the wall. I haven't done that
Exactly.
one yet.
See, there you go, everybody. You just heard it here.
So the thing is, love to hear you and Cathryn doing some more wonderful harmonies and with your stuff and whatever covers you're comfortable with doing.
I'll be putting, yeah.
Thank you.
And the other,
I told him if he makes our little cubby into a recording booth like I've been wanting to,
okay,
do it all.
Yeah.
great.
All right.
And the other thing is, on your podcasts, are you technically able to receive questions from your viewers?
Not the
Excellent question.
So we're back, everybody. We had to break one more time. And this question that my dad asked is an excellent question. And we are going to wrap up soon, by the way, if you all have lives or some shit like that, I guess. Whatever. I mean, you should be able to spend 2 hours with me. But that's a great question. And
Plus, my drink is finished.
Yeah, exactly. We need more drinks. What are the kind of the technical, limitations here? And I record every single episode on my phone other than interviews, which I'm doing on the computer on Zoom. If I were to do a thing like you said with questions, it would be a special episode where it's like, all right, on a very special MxG,
Okay.
you get to call in and stuff like that. There are ways to do that where on Zoom where you can just do, let's say, audio instead of video. So it would be hopefully, because it'd be crazy to do video where it's like 30 people. If I got that kind of a response,
Right.
but I would need, because I know people who work in this industry. I know somebody who's sort of the person who fields calls for another podcast, and that's what you need, a person who does that. So I would need what's called a staff of more than myself. And I could
You
recruit
got one sitting
Cathryn to
next to
do
you.
it, but yeah,
If she's available.
yes. And I believe in paying my people well. That's right. And then you know where that comes from right now? Patreon.com/
There you
music
go.
is not a genre.
You're
I can have a staff and more, technical, great stuff here technically.
It's either that or we're training Olga to do it.
But I appreciate what you guys were saying. And Olga's our dog, by the way. And she would stare right at us. We would talk about awkward silence.
Look, if we had Olga on the podcast in any way, we'd have millions. Okay, I'm just saying.
Let's face
she
it.
is entertaining as God.
Yeah. Dogs, children, and things not meant to be on video are what people like to watch. Yeah. But I appreciate what you guys saying. There you go. Yeah. We're maybe all of us included. And so my last question before I wrap up is kind of what you already answered that question, Dad, which was what would you like to see next season on the podcast? And
also, okay. Is it licensing that prevents you from actually playing some, like, for example, let me just go, a favorite group, one of our favorite groups, the Beatles. is when you're doing a podcast on the Beatles, is it licensing that prevents you from actually playing something that you're talking about on the Beatles?
It is. It's partly licensing. It would change the, whatever income stream I have. It would change that significantly.
What about if you use your own stuff?
Well, I do put my own stuff on every.
I know that at the end, especially,
yeah,
you've done that. But I mean, during the podcast, if you're talking about your own music and a specific song, and not sure that I'll play the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, this is another great question, because there are times where I've seen other podcasts do this, and I totally like that, and that's fine. And what I find with them is that they have what I euphemistically call production values. So you might think that this is, an adequate way that I do this, and it is honestly right now the absolute most I can do weekly in order to keep this a regular thing. To add other levels of editing, which would be cutaways with graphics, with an additional song in there, and then cutting back, would take another couple of hours every single week.
Wow.
And this again is I'm not farming this out to somebody. Every single thing you see and hear in every one of these podcasts, I'm doing myself. So for me to get to a point where I step it up to the level where I happen to mention in passing, or no, like when I do, let's say I did the Metallica episode and I was like, well, and I really like the song, Whiplash from such and such album, I think from Kill 'Em All. And then to be able to play like 10 seconds of that to like people who don't know it, or people who do know it and they enjoy it, you would think that's satisfying. And on the technical side, I know how to do all that, but it takes so much more time and so much more work to add those levels of things to every podcast that's just not a place I can go at this point. I hope to get there at some point, but it would take me setting aside the amount of time that I can only do if I'm getting like a much better Patreon response and just much better streaming numbers and things like that. So yes, I'm blaming all of you. Yeah.
Right.
It's good to put your audience on guard.
Yeah.
There you go. Right.
But to say that there are guys out there who are pretty well known for this, especially on YouTube, and the one guy I work with at Pantheon said that he knows one of those guys, and that he basically started from nowhere, and it took him at least 5 years to get to any place where he had any kind of a budget.
Wow.
And even though I've technically been doing this for almost 4 years, I didn't really start to market it until maybe 2 years ago, 2.5. So who knows where that puts me in terms of the trajectory of all this. I don't, but I will say, if that were the case, I would have somebody else here being like, okay, now I want you to go through the episode I just did and mark every time I mention a song.
Oh boy.
And then find those songs, and then maybe I'll do the edit. I don't know, but just think about the amount it takes. Like I'd have to watch every single one of my episodes back from beginning to end. And it's a lot of work.
Well, suppose you did not play the actual record from the group, but you did it yourself. Would that be the same thing?
No. The covers are under a different rule. And what's great is, especially live, that is something that Cathryn even mentioned, like, I had considered for this 200th episode to do some kind of a live performance or something like that, but the time wasn't right. Couldn't get it together. But I did once do an episode where I performed. It was a live recording of this podcast on Facebook. Sorry. And I did a song of mine called "You Make Me Wanna," paired with a Madonna song to show the similarities between the two, and also to have some fun. And so there is room for me to be able to, have live performances
of covers
on some of these podcasts.
Okay.
At some point, whether they're covers or originals.
All right.
Again, if I can set aside the time to do it properly, which it does. Again, that's going to take a lot more time, per week.
If you had the keyboard right in front of you.
Had keyboard or guitar, I would
Or guitar.
dedicate an entire episode, maybe, is what I want to do next season, is to be like, I'm going to dedicate an entire episode to just covers of things that I have covered in other episodes. And this is why I'm doing, you know, I've done these episodes because I like these songs, you know, like that kind of thing.
And
to
you do
show
the
that,
covers.
yeah, and then I would do the covers.
And
And
so you wouldn't have to pay
that's
a
a future-
licensing fee?
Nah, no, you wouldn't. You make different money when it's a cover as opposed to original, but
Okay.
if you use somebody else's recording, then that just changes everything.
Ah,
So
right.
if it's more than a few seconds of it or
Use.
something like that. There's fair use because it has to do with you're a commentator. So that means that you're not playing it for radio play, quote unquote. If you're commenting on it, then you can use
Fair
more of the
use.
song.
That's an interesting phrase.
Yeah, but
Fair-
anyway, that's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit. But yeah, these are great. These are great ideas for like future stuff. And some of that I'm probably, you know, I'm very resistant now, which means in 6 months I'm going to do it. You know,
Oh, there you
it always happens.
And I have exactly. I have two things that I would like to see from next
Ew, all
season.
right.
One of them is I want you to do an interview show where you and your interviewee are in the same room together.
Yes, I would love that.
No, not me. I live here. I want you to.
No, I
go
would
there
love
with your
that.
friends, to have
I prefer that.
because I think that could change a lot of things. Not that the
Yeah.
ones over Zoom aren't great, but I think it lends to a different dynamic.
Yes.
So I
And-
want to see that.
Yes.
And shit, I had a really good second idea, and just how quickly they come and how quickly they go. I was sitting here
Probably
holding
pop
on
up.
to it
Yeah.
for this whole time.
This
You're
is
too
why I
young
take
for that.
notes.
Second,
If I don't take notes, I completely forget without. Yeah.
So I want to see.
She's still thinking about it.
I
Yeah,
am.
Yeah. Well, we're going to fill in
Minutes,
some
I can't
time here
hear.
while you're thinking. So we
Okay.
have.
I'm gonna interrupt you with my fabulous idea.
Great. So I'm going to pretend. Speaking of live performance and speaking of songs, as you all know, at the end of almost every episode, I feature one of my songs.
Great.
And I had to figure out what to do here, and because this is sort of my party, like, well, I can play whatever I want. But one of my rules is if I have featured a full song as fully recorded in an episode, then I don't want to go back to it unless I have a good reason, because I have 100-some recordings of
Yes,
songs
you-
out there.
Oh,
I don't
boy.
need to repeat songs. I'd rather
Yeah.
continue to introduce people to other things that I've done. You can always go to the nickdamadio.com and hear everything else, or stream it wherever. And so I thought, oh, I have the perfect song for this, but I guarantee you I've already used it. And it turns out I haven't used it yet. I might have
Oh.
mentioned, but I never used it as an ender for any of these episodes. And the reason it's a perfect song is because it's one of Mom's favorites. And
What it is.
no, it's the other
no.
one. That she has
Oh.
two favorites. I've already used what it is. So that
Okay.
one, I think I have. Yeah. So, but this one, for some reason, I've never featured at the end of an episode if it feels all right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And she loves that one. So
Because that could be a big hit.
oh, thank you. And that was from REC's first album, Parts and Labor. Labor spelled in the British way, because I like Brit music.
LABOUR.
LABOUR. That's right. Yeah, that was on purpose. And this was one of the, if you can call it that, better known songs from that album, sort of one of the bigger singles, and is featured on RECcollection, the Best of Rec 2007 to 2020, blah, blah, blah. I remember working out some of the melody for this in your house.
Really?
Way back, a couple, 4 or 5 years before the album even came out.
Wow.
Where I realized that the chorus didn't have enough punch, and I had to fix that. And I had my acoustic guitar, and I was working on it in the piano room.
Oh my.
And that also the same year I bought that tripod that you use that you take to every photography session that you go. So it was a long time ago. And I realized once it came together that this was a song that was gonna, be one of the like really good ones. And we played live a lot at the time as a full band, and it always went over really well. And it's a good audience participation.
Absolutely.
The recording features you on it. It features
I
that
remember doing
you meaning my dad, if those of you can't see. And it features my daughter Katie on it, who was my the only child who could talk at the time. So if you hear a little voice in there, and it features a friend of mine, Liz, and a couple of other people. So it was I think Daniel was
that's
on.
great.
Yeah. So that's the song I'm featuring in the next minute or two.
Hey, congratulations on 200 elbows.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, amen.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm very excited. And I think one of the things that's a hallmark of everything I do is I don't like stasis. I'm always looking for consistency is different from stasis. I love consistency, but I also love change. That's why I love evolution, because evolution is consistent change. And for me, from one episode to the next, from one season to the next, I like to find something slightly different to punch up or to add to the mix. Some of those suggestions you've made and things like that are great ideas and things I want to incorporate. I've had other guests on who've suggested things. A guy named Lon Dorsey suggested some stuff that I was also resistant to that I ended up incorporating, some of which. So I plan to make some more changes like that in season 6, but you're all going to have to wait because I'm taking the next couple of weeks off finally, so we can go on vacation, aka take the ferry from Queens to Manhattan for 2 hours.
Hell yeah, baby.
Yeah, that's our big vacation this year.
Oh yeah.
Love a ferry ride. Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for being here today.
That's our pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Be with you too.
This was really fun. Who was that?
Hey,
She's saying bye.
Are you back? Are you there? All right. Yeah.
He's playing a song special for you.
Julie.
Oh yeah, she was out of the room, but the featured song I'm doing for this episode, I haven't used it yet in any episode, and it happens to be If It Feels All Right.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. All right.
My favorite.
So thank you everybody out there as well for watching.
Congratulations
listening.
again.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone out there who has any ideas as well as what you'd like to see or hear on the podcast for next season, please let me know. If you're a Patreon member, I will listen to you. If not, I will. I'd like the band says live. We please throw out your requests. We take all requests. We don't play them, but we take them. That's one of our standard lines.
I like that.
But I do take everything to heart, and I do appreciate everybody's time and attention and feedback, certainly, because as always, my objectives for every episode are music, conversation, and connection.
Amen.
Thank you to everyone here and everyone out there, and I'll see you next season.
Yeah, we love you guys.
Oh, right back at you.
Just
so